Imagine having the worst headache of your life. You rush to the ER. They do an urgent brain scan, and doctors tell you, good news, it's completely normal. Go home and rest. You breathe a sigh of relief. 5 days later, you are dead. But here is a twist. Even after a completely different hospital took over her care and cleared her, the original doctor was still dragged into the court. This is the bizarre, tragic story of a tiny medical detail that cost a woman her life and sparked a major legal battle in Chicago, United States. Welcome to Vitals and Verdicts, where small moments decide big outcomes. It started on a summer night in Chicago. A woman in her 40s suddenly clutched her head. This was a sudden, explosive pain, what doctors call a thunderclap headache. Her family dialed 911. At the emergency department, doctors immediately suspected a brain bleed and rushed her for an urgent CT scan. The scan was reviewed by the radiologist on duty. His report was reassuring. No bleeding, normal scan. Based on that report, she was treated for her pain and discharged home. Case closed, right? Wrong. The very next morning, during a routine review of overnight scans, another radiologist examined the exact same CT images. Where the first doctor saw nothing, the second radiologist saw a subtle abnormality, a subarachnoid hemorrhage, bleeding around the brain. The hospital immediately contacted the patient. You need to come back right now. She returned to emergency department, where the doctors explained that the original scan may have misread and strongly recommended that she stay in the hospital for further investigation and treatment. But instead, she decided to seek medical care at another hospital she trusted more. At the second hospital, doctors started from scratch. They performed another CT scan. They even carried out a CT angiogram to examine the blood vessels in her brain. And incredibly, both tests were reported as normal. But here's the detail that would later become central to the lawsuit. The second hospital had the written report from the first hospital warning about a possible bleed, but they did not have the original CT images to compare with their own scans. Seeing no active bleed on their investigation, they discharged her home. At that point, most people would assume the first doctor was off the hook. After all, another hospital had independently assessed her and found nothing. But that's not what happened. Just 4 days later, she suddenly collapsed from a catastrophic brain hemorrhage. Despite emergency treatment, she passed away. Her family filed a medical negligence lawsuit against the first radiologist. Their argument was simple. His missed diagnosis delayed a critical treatment. But the defense had a powerful argument. They said once the possible mistake was discovered, we immediately contacted the patient. She chose not to stay at our hospital. Instead, she went to another hospital where a completely different team independently assessed her, performed their own scans, and discharged her. How can we still be legally responsible? The trial judge agreed. The case was dismissed before it ever reached a jury. For the doctor, it looked like the legal battle was finally over. But the family appealed, and the Illinois Appellate Court reached a very different conclusion. The judges ruled that a jury, not a judge, needed to answer 3 critical questions. First, did the misdiagnosis reduce the chance of her survival? Second, could earlier treatment have changed the outcome? And third, did the failure to transfer the original CT images affect the care she received at a different hospital? Because those questions could not be answered without weighing expert medical evidence, the appellate court overturned the dismissal and sent the case back to the trial court. The case may have gone to the trial, settled privately, or been resolved in another way that was never publicly disclosed. But the lesson remains. A normal CT scan is only as good as the eyes interpreting it. In medicine, a tiny diagnostic error can have life-changing consequences. And in the courtroom, the biggest question isn't simply, was there a mistake? It's, did the mistake change the patient's outcome? Sometimes only a jury can decide.